Meanwhile, in another combat exercise in the Baltics, Russian Navy fighter jets and bombers have conducted drills against land-based targets at a bombing range. It's part of the Baltic Fleet's ongoing wider drills, which are expected to be held in every body of water bordering Russia. Well, let's get more on this with geopolitical analyst and the executive editor of 21stCenturyWire.com, Patrick Henningsen. Thank you for joining us on the programme. It's great to see you. So, Sergei Lavrov today has been very clear, hasn't he? Russia wants no war. But the West is also clear, insisting Russia does want war. So where do we stand, Patrick?
It's funny when you're reading the objections that the United States representatives are putting forward. It's almost like a bullet point list of what the United States itself is doing. They're demanding that Russia de-escalates their aggressive behavior, stops inflammatory rhetoric, approaches discussions on collective European security with a spirit of reciprocity. These are all things that the U.S. themselves are either doing or not doing in the demands that the United States is making to Russia. So, from a diplomatic point of view, I can really see the frustration in Moscow that it's almost like you're dealing with a party. It's very difficult to take seriously and have any sort of meaningful bilateral diplomacy or negotiations.
It's quite amusing how many times Russia has to repeat that it doesn't want any war. How feasible is it, do you think, that Russia could convince Western countries that it has no plans to invade Ukraine?
Well, the problem is, and I think this is now starting to get fleshed out quite well in the media now with the recent story that was published by CNN. And so according to this Ukrainian official, and this was published in CNN of all places, that no, there is no imminent Russian invasion. They don't have plans to sack Kiev, as many in the U.S. and the media are crowing about right now. I mean, talk about inflammatory rhetoric. So you can see where possibly here where the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government are in fact seeing that there is a lot of media manipulation going on the Western side, especially in the U.S. and the U.K.
It's interesting, isn't it, how Washington plans to use its leverage over Ukraine. Lavrov also said that only the Americans are able to influence Ukraine now. How do you expect things to play out?
It really depends on a few things. One of them is whether or not there can be any chance that President Zelensky can engage with Moscow directly without having to go through the middleman of some sort of U.S. or NATO intermediary or some elaborate summit that I'm sure the U.S. would like to be shepherding in Geneva or something like this in order to, quote, diffuse the situation. So, I mean, that's what's really missing in this is really meaningful bilateral talks between two neighboring countries, Ukraine and Russia. So, when that happens and when if you look at the Minsk Accords and the countries that are a party to that agreement, if that can be sort of put forward and moved forward, I think then you have a real chance for some progress in this stalemate, specifically regarding the Donbass. But what really everyone wants to see is they want to see a ceasefire. They want to see a cessation of hostilities. I'm sure most parties want to see that, but it doesn't seem like that's really what the United States wants. And therein lies the problem.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? The US is calling for a diplomatic solution. At the same time, it's sending its fourth shipment of arms into Ukraine. Does it seem hypocritical?
Well, if you listen to Anthony Blinken's statement, his press conference yesterday, he seems to be concerned with two things. One of them is stockpiles of weapons and the flow of weapons, and the other is stockpile of energy. But it's interesting because the United States and then Britain are leading the charge to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from going online between Russia and Germany. At the same time, Tony Blinken is saying that, well, we need to stop Russia from weaponizing its gas supply, cutting off its gas supply in Europe because it will destabilize the price, when in fact this is what the US, the UK, and some other NATO allies are doing. They're working vehemently to stop Russian gas supplies from entering Europe and stabilizing the spot price for natural gas, for instance. So it's hard to take them seriously when they're saying two different things in the same speech. It's pretty incredible.
Sergei Lavrov speaking today, said he wants to continue with talks with the US and NATO to try to resolve the issue. Do you expect any of Moscow's red lines to be respected, though?
I don't know. I'm not encouraged by the sort of speech that was given by Jens Stoltenberg, the director of NATO, which they posted online just yesterday. It's not very encouraging. It is highly politicized. And as your previous commentator noted, ideological in its sort of approach. And this is the opposite of what you'd expect from NATO, but it seems like, is NATO taking the ideological lead in this sort of battle to spread freedom and democracy around the world, or is this normally the purview of countries like the United States? So it's very confusing right now, and NATO is desperate to find relevance in the world, and it is really working hard to try to, I think, ramp up this crisis in order to keep itself relevant. So this is what we see anyway.
Patrick Henningsen, geopolitical analyst, executive editor of 21st Century Wire.com. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.